Projections of the United States debt just got released, and let me tell you, it is absolutely shocking just how much the U.S. will get in debt in just 5 years here, folks, because the U.S. debt spiral and the government has an absolute giant spending problem. So we're going to go through this projection and look at what the problem is and talk about today if the United States can make some moves to potentially slow this down. So first, let's dive in to, of course, the projection that was released today that the U.S. debt will reach 150 trillion by 2055. That would be up 1.6 million of debt per American household. 1.6 million. Right now, we're just about 300,000 at 274,000. And it would push the U.S. debt to GDP ratio to a record 169%. I mean, we're already at 123%, which is absolutely insane. And to put this in perspective, U.S. GDP to debt averaged 69% over the last 50 years. The CBO projects that the budget deficit will exceed 5% of the U.S. GDP annual growth every single year until 2055. And in U.S. history, deficits this high have only occurred for 5 straight years, one time during World War II, which is insane. So we're in a debt crisis, and it's set to get even worse here, folks. So, as you guys all know and love, the U.S. debt clock, we're at 37, nearly $0.5 trillion worth of there. And it's just ticking up, and it is not slowing down by any means necessary. Now, with this, right, everybody's been talking about, okay, the tariffs, the trade wars, and everything else. This would potentially bring in more revenue. But based on the current data and expert analysis, tariffs cannot even realistically pay off the U.S. debt. It'll increase that government revenue, but the biggest issue is not about the revenue. The United States government gets more and more revenue literally every single year. The issue is that the U.S. has a spending problem, and it's not slowing down that spending by any means. So the U.S. debt is skyrocketing in flight, and it's absolutely astronomical. Now, on top of that, right, we have China's export to the U.S. plunging 30%, 33% year over year, marking one of the steepest declines in history. So the trade war between China and the U.S. is absolutely erupting here as we're seeing a wild decrease. And make sure you guys are hitting that subscribe button with the bell notification so you guys can join me, because I'm going to be detailing all of this very closely here today, as China's importing from the U.S. 16%, and China's shipments to other places has driven upwards. So everybody else is maybe potentially moving away from the U.S., but everywhere else, they're saying, hey, you know what? We will take all these Chinese imports because you guys are making cheaper products for us. And despite the diversification, U.S. still remains China's single largest country market, buying $283 billion worth of goods year to date. But it's actually kind of insane just to see this drastic fall off. But either way, the U.S. debt and the trade war is at an all-time rate, and we're seeing it just skyrocket up. But something else interesting happened the other day, where Russia, a special advisor from Russia's Anton Kobyov, said that the U.S. has something really, let's call it, interesting here. And let's tune into this clip.
Америка прямо сейчас пытается поменять правила на рынке золота и криптовалют. Вспомните, какой у них долг. 35 триллионов долларов. В общем-то, это два альтернативных валютному сегменту мировых рынка. Действия Вашингтона в этом направлении отчетливо демонстрируют одну из главных американских задач. Они очень хотят решить проблему снижения доверия к доллару.
So everybody is saying, hey, you know what? This is what they're highlighting here. The debt is absolutely spiraling out of control, And so they're going to use cryptocurrency in order to pay off the debt, which I think is very interesting because, those in the Bitcoin space and everywhere else has been lining this out. But the unique twist here is that there's been a heavy push in the stablecoin realm, with Tether and others getting involved heavily. Look, Tether is one of the biggest holders of United States debt. There's no way around it. We see that there's writing on the wall, right? And now it's getting more intertwined with the United States government, now bringing on Bo Hines and others. So the intertwining here, and Russia essentially saying the quiet parts out loud with the debt projections being absolutely insane. And look, these officials are saying that, hey, it could reach 52 trillion, so it could double in 10 years, climb to 118% of GDP by that year, surpassing its historical highs. Now, this increase is driven by growth mandatory spending. That's insane. This spending is allegedly for growth, right? But it's mandatory, and they're doing it in order to try to, hey, give the economy a little, let's call it kick in the tail here. But with all of this, right, it just highlights the fact that the U.S. economy and the U.S. Government has a spending problem. They cannot slow this down anytime soon because they just continue to keep spending and spending and spending and spending. And now they're mandating spending to make sure that there's going to be even more spending, which is absolutely insane, right? So this is not slowing down, and they're going to continue to see the spending increase over time. And because the spending is going to increase, well, the debt's not going anywhere. In fact, the debt at $35 trillion, it looks like it's going to double. Now, it's at 37 trillion now. We're going to probably reach 40 trillion by the end of this year, just by the looks of it here. Especially with what is to come in 9-ish days. We've got an 88% chance that the U.S. is going to cut interest rates just one time. And then we have an 11.6% chance that we're going to cut 50 basis points. So it's a foregone conclusion, an absolute certainty that the United States government is going to cut interest rates. Now, this is where the floodgates are going to open. But the interesting thing is I think at this point in time, everybody is now pricing in at least one rate cut during this time, 25 basis points. Now, if we get a 50 basis point cut, well, that's where I think you'll see the markets really take off. But on the flip side of things, this will be a very interesting, I guess, breakdown as we, start to see this really take off. And with the Dixie just being where it is at 97.5 about, you got to scratch your head and ask yourself, what the hell is going on here? Because we're trying to cut interest rates and keep them low with the amount of just potential, I guess, liquidity being added to that market. And then, we have the S&P 500 essentially floating around its all-time high. All while everybody's like saying, hey, you know what? The consumer is not doing well. The debt is spiraling out of control. I've been following the debt and the overall consumer a bunch on this channel. So if you guys are subscribed, thank you for continuing to tune in. If you're not, please hit that subscription button to help me keep on growing this channel, because maybe I'll go into this a little bit more here tomorrow. But there's now a record of homes for sale in the southern U.S. It's 21,000 higher than the 2006 peak. So everybody's trying to get out of their houses in the South. And it's half of what we saw during the 2020 pandemic. Meanwhile, new homes for sale in the West have risen, and the new homes inventory. But the housing market is showing some signs of cracks, and we aren't necessarily seeing the most strong housing market, just simply because houses that are on the market and for sale, they just aren't moving. You just continue to see, more and more houses on the market. And we are seeing, some potential issues here. So I'm going to be following this very closely. We see, gold and others trying to hedge their bets here with the potential of this weak economy. So make sure you guys are hitting that subscribe button. I'm going to keep this one short and sweet for you. Hit the subscribe, hit the like, and I'll catch you guys all tomorrow.